People imagine Alaska as endless action. Caribou herds, swooping eagles, bears framed in postcard sunlight. Most days, it's only silence. That's what I love. Silence keeps the world sharp around the edges. The magazine called 6 weeks ago, a winter biodiversity piece, 2-week solo in the interior, man versus wilderness flavor. I said yes before they finished the pitch. Been doing this job 15 years, and I'd rather share a tent with Frost than an editor. The bush pilot dropped me 10 miles south of Denali, near a plateau where snow folds into itself like whipped cream. We circled once before touching down. Below us, rivers lay frozen mid-gesture. The pilot wouldn't even kill the engine. "Weather turns fast here," he shouted over the prop wash, "and you don't camp near the canyon after dark." He gave me a nod, not friendly, not unfriendly, then lifted off, leaving me swallowed by rotor noise and the feeling that I'd been signed out of civilization. The first afternoon went by in methodical rhythm, pitching the canvas tent, marking waypoints with orange flags, checking the solar charger's meager readout. Temperature hovered at -20°C. I logged camera #1 facing North Slope, camera #2 toward the river gorge, set a wide-angle time-lapse for aurora tests. Everything worked, which was new enough to feel wrong. When darkness came, it wasn't the warm provincial night of city outskirts. It was a depth. The sky carried so many stars it looked bruised. I stood outside the tent until my eyelashes iced together, listening. Nothing. No wind, no owls, not even the crack of cooling timber. Finally, I muttered into the recorder pinned to my parka. Day 1, camp established, full silence. Locals call the nearby ravine Crawler's Run, probably folklore. The playback clicked behind me, speaker echoing my voice back half a second late, like a polite reply. I chalked it to a glitch. First nights always prick at the nerves. Still, before turning in, I propped the rifle within arm's reach and told the Arctic what I always tell new terrain: I'm only here to watch. The wind rose once, quick as a laugh, and that was the end of it. By the second morning, the nothingness had a tone, a soft hiss between wind and heartbeat that I could clip on a recorder but never quite isolate. You start to feel the scale of this place only when you wake to it. Every breath frosting in the air like proof that you still count in the math of the cold. The camp sat at the throat of a valley 20 miles from the nearest village, a handful of prefabricated research huts half buried in snow load. The last crew had winterized everything before pulling out in November. Their notes were still pinned over the radio desk, handwritten signal logs, coffee rings frozen in pale brown splotches. When I checked the frequency meter, it showed activity on an unassigned band. A little pulse every 8 seconds, like someone testing a beacon. When I asked in Fairbanks via satellite text whether a nearby team was active, dispatch answered, "No current expeditions registered in that area. Stay routine." The locals at the airstrip had loaded me with campfire warnings between fuel drums. They spoke of something called the Bending Man. I laughed, thought it was a byproduct of too many tourists and too few daylight hours. They said the name came from hunters who'd seen a man-thing running on hands and feet, arms bending backward to match the snowdrifts. "Don't whistle at it," one had told me. "It stops when you do." I tried to exercise their stories with work, positioned bait cameras by a half-frozen stream, set audio traps to track wolves. Every click of the shutter cracked the air so loud it felt like shouting in a cathedral. That night, I cooked dried lentils over camp stove sputter while editing shots. Moose, snowshoe hare, and Arctic fox, all crisp in the lens, nothing out of order. Through the wall of the tent, ice creaked like a tired joint. I scribbled in the logbook. Day 2. Visibility excellent. Locals myth persists. No tracks except mine. When I signed off the radio at 2300, the signal spike appeared again. 3 blips closer together now, then silence. Out of habit, I switched the unit off. I didn't want phantom transmissions stealing battery. Before sleeping, I stepped outside to drain tea into the snow. The green aurora hung low, stirring the surface like breath on glass. For a moment, I thought the snow beside my tripod pulsed in rhythm with the sky. I almost pressed the shutter, but my hands had gone too stiff to move, and besides, the light didn't seem meant for me to capture, more like it was watching which way I bent. The first prints appeared on the morning of the fourth day. I'd gone out early, 40 below, to check a trail camera positioned near the tree line. The lens had iced over. I cleared it with my glove and reset the timer, breath drifting like steam. Then I saw them, indentations meandering across the snowfield beyond the stunted spruces. At first, I assumed bear. The spacing was wide, weight heavy, the drag between marks deep as a boot sole. But the closer I looked, the less any of it made sense. Each paw had 5 long impressions running forward, not sideways, and the palm pad was stretched, like a hand pressing down with its fingers extended. The pattern alternated left-right, neat as marching feet. And the direction of travel? Straight toward my camp. I photographed every print, aperture f11, low light, 1/60th second. The instant the shutter snapped, the camera's preview flickered, 2 frames layered, mine and something else. The second image showed the fresh print, but with a faint smudge near its edge. Looked almost like another handprint laid atop it, fingers bent backward at the joints. I crouched to compare scale. My glove dwarfed the print by an inch, but depth said something heavier than me had made it. Closer inspection revealed each fingertip lined with tiny crescents carved into the ice, catching white sunlight like teeth marks. Wind carried my breath sideways. It should have erased everything, but the prints stayed sharp while all others blurred, wolf, hare, mine included. The trail ended 50 yards shy of camp. No turnaround, no overlapping return set. It simply stopped. Back inside the tent, I spread the memory card into the laptop. The first image loaded as expected. Second, third, all stable. But when I clicked the fourth, the screen jittered with a white flash. The photo gained an extra shadow running parallel to mine, crouched, head tilted. I told myself it was a glitch until the software tagged the frame metadata. The camera's GPS coordinates placed that photo 9 meters closer to the tent than where I'd standing, and the timestamp was 6 seconds after I'd shut the shutter. By afternoon, thick clouds swallowed the sun. I swept around the perimeter, rifle slung, shouting into the pines, more for company than warning. The echo came back doubled, as though 2 voices shouted my name from slightly different distances. I stopped calling after that. Instead, I dragged a circle of rope line around camp, tied a single flare at each quadrant, and whispered to the empty snow, "Stay." It seemed good practice to say something, even if whatever listened didn't understand words, just tone. On the 5th night, the audio traps started acting up. I'd set 4 recorders around the camp's perimeter on tripods waist high so they could pick up distinct channels of animal noise. The northern mic caught wind. The southern registered static. The western one, that's where everything went wrong. At 2:43 a.m., I woke because the headset plugged into the bass unit began feeding me sound in bursts, like a heartbeat, a high pitch rising, dropping, then pausing exactly 2 seconds apart. At first it chimed like wolf howls echoing too far, but when I reversed the playback, it formed syllables. Breathing, deliberate, the cadence strangely human. I told myself it was coincidence, air pressure flexing the diaphragm of the mic. Still, I sat there translating the patterns into words until dawn, and the first light settled my nerves. The closest match I could piece together sounded like leave the light be. By day, I napped poorly, half dreaming of packs moving through the trees. I'd spent enough seasons filming wolves to know their voices, but every natural chorus ends the same, with silence rolling back like tide. This one didn't. It deepened into something that felt directed. That evening, I tested the recorders again, my voice briefing to the log as usual. Audio check, day 5, resetting drives, battery replaced, 1900 hours. I set one unit against a stump facing downslope, pressed record, and kept speaking so I could sync later. Logging, lights gone emerald, aurora expected. The recorder echoed me in real time. Not after I spoke, but with me, matching cadence like a harmony. Same tone, half a note lower. I cut power. Sound stopped instantly. The western tree line stayed gray long after sunset, as if it was still twilight there while the rest of the valley drowned in dark. Near 8 p.m., something screamed uphill, shrill, descending, ending not with breath but with inhalation. I should have stayed in the tent. Instead, discipline overruled every animal instinct, and I clicked the camera to burst mode, shooting toward the sound. 10 frames, maybe 11, before the wind shoved me backward. Later, scrolling through the images, 9 showed nothing but snow ripples. The 10th made my chest seize. A shape off to the left, bent low, pale bands where limbs ought to blur. No fur, no clothes, no face. Just a mouth stretched open in reverse expression, jaw pointing upward as if the head had flipped. After midnight, the recorders fell quiet again. Somewhere behind me, frost cracked under weight. I held the rifle ready and listened as the noise circled once around the tent, slow and rhythmic. Then a tap brushed the canvas above my head, less like a knock and more like fingertips testing thin skin. I waited hours, counting breaths. When the first gray of morning returned, I opened the flap. Smooth new snow, no tracks, only the scent of cold iron and a single mark level with my eye. 4 long lines, ending in a smear shaped like a hand dragged downward by something that crawled, not walked, away. By the 6th day, the world had stopped feeling vast. The valley pressed close, the white on every horizon swallowing distance until movement became the only proof of space. I shot hundreds of frames just to remind myself the landscape could still change. Mid-afternoon, I climbed to a ridge east of camp to photograph a herd of caribou. The light was merciless, perfect blue sky, snow so reflective it blinded through goggles. Nothing extraordinary until the herd's lead bull stiffened, nose high, and the whole line broke away uphill, scattering as if cut from a string. Through the telephoto, I saw what scared them. At first, just a mound in the snow. 10 seconds later, the mound moved, folding and unfolding with slow deliberation. The shape straightened and became the rough outline of a body, pallid and hairless, limbs jointed wrong, knees and elbows bending sideways like hinges assembled backward. I did what instinct drilled into every wildlife photographer since birth: lift the camera, document, keep breathing small. I rattled 3 bursts. Click, click, click. Lungs tight against the cold, I waited, lens steady. When I checked the playback, my glove froze on the button. Frame 1, shape half buried at 60 yards. Frame 2, same angle, now 40. Frame 3, nothing but scatter of snow where it had lain. No motion blur, no transitional prints. Between shutter presses, milliseconds, it had closed 20 yards of frozen ground. My breath plumed too loud. I spun in a slow circle, panorama view scanning the slope, white on white on white. The camera blanked, memory full, right as my shadow stretched before me and another joined it, longer by half. I whipped around. The snow was flat. Back at camp, shaking, I loaded the SD card. The metadata claimed all 3 frames were taken at the same timestamp, down to the 10th of a second. Impossible, yet there it was. I spent that evening building a perimeter of flares and empty tin cans, the kind of cartoon defense I'd mock in city light. The cans stayed still for hours, then jingled once, somewhere behind the tent at about 11. When I crawled out to look, I caught a brief shimmer in the aurora, a human form rising on all fours, elbows moving like wings clipping ground. Just one heartbeat of vision, then gone. Inside the tent, I dragged the sleeping bag zipper all the way to my chin and left the camera aimed at the door. I must have drifted off sometime before dawn. When I woke, the camera's battery was dead. The lens pointed slightly upward. Reviewing in camera, the final still showed nothing but my tent ceiling and a partial reflection in the lens glass. 2 eyes, not mine, wide and milky, staring down at me from above the shot. I broke camp at first light. A rational man doesn't wait for proof of nightmares. The nearest research cabin lay 5 miles east, marked on the topo as a communications relay, likely still stocked with fuel and a satellite link. I packed only what mattered: camera cards, rifle, a day's rations, and started skiing along the frozen creek. Snow fell in soundless clumps, erasing my trail as fast as I made it. Through the fog, I could still sense the valley breathing, occasional groans of ice shifting, a far-off snap echoing twice as if the land were mocking me. Every few minutes I checked over my shoulder, always the same slate of white emptiness, yet the hairs on my arms kept lifting, a silent static. By noon, I spotted the relay roofline jutting from the drifts, half the antenna bent and glittering with frost. Relief hit hard enough to hurt. I slammed open the doorway, coughing at the smell. Metal, mildew, something faintly copper. Inside were 3 bunks, a comms rack, and silence that rotted the air. No bodies, no blood, but the walls were scratched. Long horizontal gouges at shoulder height, each paired as if made by hands, not claws, sliding along metal on tiptoe. The radio still powered up, screen lit pale green, tubes humming. I toggled the emergency channel. Relay 2 to Fairbanks Control, come back. Static. This is Kearns Eli Field Unit 481. Anyone copy? A pause, then a faint click. Not signal, not language, more like breathing pressed through wires. I tried again, hands steady only because training held it there. Eventually, a new file folder blinked on the monitor. Log 201R, time-stamped 2 days ahead. I opened it. Video feed. The camera faced the same room I stood in, same bunks, same radio desk, but empty. Past the window, snow drifted opposite direction, meaning the file wasn't mirrored. Then movement, something pale crawling into the frame from below, limbs wrong, back arched like a spider folding downward. It lifted its head just enough to show a face, mine, blurred at the edges, mouth opening too wide. I killed power, snapped the laptop shut, and smashed its battery pack with the rifle stock. While the echo still bounced around the cabin, a sound came from above. The shallow creak of rafters flexing under weight, followed by a slow, deliberate scrape as fingertips traced across wood. I aimed upward, throat locked. The scraping stopped right above the radio desk. Snow filtered through a crack in the ceiling like salt poured over glass. When I stepped outside, the roof was clean, untouched except for 4 long impressions running from eave to peak, as if something had just finished backing away into the cloud cover on all 4s. That night, I didn't build a fire. Fire draws eyes. I stayed in the relay cabin, lights off, windows shuttered except for a pencil-wide slit where my scope could watch the snowfield. The temperature had plunged low enough that breath frost crystallized mid-air. Beyond the drift, the world looked soft and perfect, too perfect. Nothing leaves a mark at 30 below. Everything should look the same. Around midnight, the thermal scope blinked to life. A simple practice check. Dark equals cold, light equals heat. The horizon lay blank until the lens caught a smear of orange halfway down the hill. A single heat source, human-sized, moving on all 4s. At first, I thought it might be another researcher, some lost trapper. Then the figure paused, hunched too low, limbs eel-smooth against the snow. A second glow flared 500 feet to its right, then a third, each crawling in concert, perfectly paced, circling like wolves in silent rehearsal. I whispered into the recorder, 3 signatures, human temperature, patterning around perimeter. One of the shapes eased closer. The outline brightened until the scope struggled to differentiate flesh from thermal bloom. Whatever it was, it burned hot as an engine block. I flicked the rifle's safety and fired a flare round high into the storm. White light fell like a dropped star. The figures froze. Every grain of snow turned golden. I could see detail now, length of limb, colorless skin, chests moving too fast for breathing, their heads tilted back in unison. I fired. The report cracked the air. The recoil shoved through my shoulder, and for half a heartbeat a cloud of red steam erupted where the lead hit. The silhouette didn't fall. The heat signature separated instead, splitting down the middle like fabric torn in two. Both halves crawled again, slower, dragging what looked like ribs against ice. I stopped shooting. Pointless. You can't kill what flinches like mist. The shapes kept orbiting until the scope fogged over, lens frosting from the inside. I wiped it clear once, twice. Each time the ring of heat had shrunk until it hugged the cabin walls. Then they stopped moving. For 5 whole minutes, the display glowed steady yellow around me, a circle of warmth that shouldn't exist. When the batteries died, I was already holding my breath, because the air inside the cabin had begun to rise in temperature, 32, 36, 40 degrees, like something exhaling through the thin cracks of wood. When dawn filtered through cloud, the thermometer read 0 again. On the snow outside, 30 feet from the door, a line of naked footprints led away. Not human, not animal. Each heel spaced precisely as if measured with a ruler. And beside every print, pressed delicately into the crust, were fingerprints. By the 8th day, I stopped speaking aloud unless the recorder was running. It wasn't superstition, it was audit. Every word had to prove itself real later. Morning light came strained through the frost-streaked window. The inside of the glass wore thin trails like someone idly dragging fingernails. I brewed instant coffee, hands trembling too much to measure. A small mechanical comfort. Heat equals life, noise equals courage. At 10:04 a.m., the first anomaly of the day arrived. The Western motion sensor triggered, 3 rapid beeps, movement where there hadn't been any since the storm. I stepped outside, rifle raised, latched gaze on that patch of snow just beyond the ridge. Nothing. The world, still. When I came back in, the recorder was still running. My voice played softly through its speakers, only it wasn't my voice from when I'd left. Eli, the tape breathed, perfectly synced to my footsteps approaching. Eli, coffee's ready. My mouth went dry. I hadn't said those words. The recorder clicked off by itself. For the next hour, I tried to busy my mind, take down and reassemble camera gear, sort drives, anything. But the quiet dragged my eyes again and again to the tent flap I'd hung over the door to block drafts. Each time the fabric quivered, not from breeze, but from low rhythm, like breath through cloth shared with something on the other side. By late afternoon, I forced myself to test one audio trap in controlled conditions. I set the recorder on the table and said clearly, "Test, test, day 8, Eli Kearns speaking." Then I backed away 5 paces and waited 30 seconds before hitting playback. Test, test, day 8, Eli Kearns speaking. Test, test, day 8, Eli, speaking. Eli. 3 versions, each clearer, each punctuated by a breath between syllables, the breath I'd been trying not to make. When darkness arrived, the mimicry turned bold. From outside the cabin came a voice exactly mine, calling softly, conversational. "Found something, you should see this." Every phrase one I'd used earlier in the week. I gripped the rifle tight enough to squeal its metal. "Who's there?" The answer came instantly, pitch perfect. "Who's there?" Then again, wrong rhythm. "Who is there?" The words learning to walk. It began circling, repeating whatever I said, fixing the mistakes, adjusting the emphasis, until it pronounced my own accent flawlessly. The last version added a chuckle I hadn't made in years. Then silence. Through the window slit, I caught a shape crouched just beyond the flare line, head cocked, both hands pressed flat to the snow, as if listening through it. Each slow inhale fogged the crust in sync with mine. I turned off every light and whispered into the dark. "You can keep the voice." It never did much for me. Something outside whispered back, almost kindly, "Keep the face, then." The next gust of wind rattled the shutters, and from that moment, every sound the cabin made had my laugh buried somewhere inside it. Snow had swallowed half the door by the time I broke from the relay again. The air felt heavier now, like breathing through cloth, and each gust trailed a sound behind it, low and almost human. I followed the creek south until I found the map's last black square, an old trapper's site, forgotten decades earlier, roof barely clinging to its beams. Inside smelled of smoke and iodine. Candle stubs ringed a cracked stove. Animal pelts hung stiff as boards. I shut the door, wedged my pack against the gap, and struck one match, promising myself just enough light to confirm the place was empty. The flame climbed up the nearest wall and found faces. Photo paper lined the logs from floor to ceiling, hundreds of prints, each nailed there by crude staples, glossy finish reflecting the match. Every photo showed snow, men or women kneeling mid-frame, some blurry, some sharp, all staring straight at the camera. Fresh dates scrawled their edges, 1995, 2003, 2017. I moved closer. Many of the newer prints were mine. The same camera angles, same timestamps from my files, but subtly wrong. Each image contained a doubled shadow behind me, bent forward on hands and knees. Near the back wall, a cluster of 8 photos formed a collage. The final one had been nailed directly over the cabin window, sealing it. In it, I recognized the relay hut, daylight, doorway wide open. A figure stood in it wearing my parka. Something thin crouched behind him, face pressed to his spine as if sniffing. My stomach turned to ice. I backed away until my shoulder knocked another frame loose. It hit the floor face down. The film beneath it was decades older, sepia fading to tan. The subject held a camera almost identical to mine, the same serial scrawled on the strap. Beneath the photo, a name scratched by knife tip, Kearns E., recovered 1964. I burned the match halfway down before noticing a line of Polaroids arranged along the mantel shelf. 30 identical shots showing the same cabin interior, each from a slightly lower angle. The newest wasn't dusty, warm to the touch. The camera on the table blinked its charge light once. My camera. Except the strap still hugged my neck. The screen powered itself, loading the last image. Not outside, not me taking photos. Someone, or something, had taken the shot from the corner of the room, framing me kneeling before the wall of faces, my own shoulders hunched, head slightly turned as if listening. Behind that frozen image, through the reflection of my laptop screen, something moved. The photo hung a breath longer on the display, then updated in real time, the captured version of me lifting its eyes to match mine. By nightfall, the wind came roaring down from the peaks, spinning the world white. The blizzard smothered all sound outside, but made the cabin moan like an old throat clearing itself. I bolted every shutter, wedged the door shut with my pack, and stapled blankets over the cracks where snow hissed through. When you're cut off like that, time loses width. You just have moments, stacked thin between gusts. I stayed awake cleaning my rifle and sorting shells by touch. Routine is religion against panic. Each time a flake hissed against the stovepipe, I imagined fingers brushing metal. When the storm peaked, the tapping started again. Not frantic, deliberate. Tap, 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 tap. At first, I mistook it for loose boards, then remembered the missing Morse key beside the relay desk. Whoever had heard that pattern would know it spelled numbers. I wrote them down on a scrap of receipt paper. 6, 3, 7, 2, 4, 8, then a pause, then stop, repeat. Then came another line. LAT 6302N, long 1481W. My coordinates. The tapping shifted after the last digit, spreading along the walls in a clockwise circle, as if several hands were passing the code around, drumming it down to the floorboards. I dragged a crate onto the table and climbed up to check the roof hatch. The trapdoor pulsed to each impact. The things were up there using my exact rhythm. I pulled the flare pistol from my belt and fired straight through the ceiling seam. The room flooded orange for half a second. The smell of burning wood rode the heat down. Then everything went still. I heard a camera shutter click just outside the door. Not mine, the real one hung against my chest, safety light blinking idle. Another shutter answered from the opposite wall, then another behind the stove. 3 angles, all closer. I tossed a flare into the snow through the stove vent, hoping its light would mark where I was for any satellite still overhead. The storm swallowed the glow before it hit ground. Breathing turned ragged inside my own ears. I whispered, "You want the picture? Take it." Silence. Then, through the blizzard, a voice perfectly calm, maybe female, saying, "Already did." Wood popped. The doorframe bowed inward an inch, snow gusting through in a whip. In the flash of lightning, I saw hand impressions crawling across the outside planks, palm first, dragging downward as they moved. 10, 20, more than there should be. I backed to the center of the room, flare gun reloaded, knowing the next sound would decide if I stayed photographer or fossil. Outside, the wind dropped to humming, and the voice spoke again, now in my tone. "Smile for the last exposure, Eli." The cabin shook once, like the world sneezing, and then all sound quit. No wind, no wood flexing, just the hush that falls in the second between lightning and thunder. It was so complete, I could hear my pulse clicking in my ears. I knew it wouldn't stop, not on its own, not until I showed it what it wanted. The camera is my only language, so I set the tripod dead center of the room, mounted the main body, switched to timer, flash armed. Proof, I told myself. Get it on film and the ghost turns to weather. I unlatched the door. The blizzard had collapsed into glitter drift, thick flakes lazily tumbling through moonlight. For a moment it was beautiful, like ash falling in slow motion. I stepped outside barefoot so I could feel the vibration through the crust. The snow bit hard but held, solid as glass. I pressed the clicker for a 30-second exposure, walked 12 paces forward, and turned the flashlight under my chin, a parody of campfire fright. At 9 seconds, the air trembled. A figure uncurled from the snow 40 feet ahead, halfway between crawl and kneel. It moved exactly when I moved, every motion echoing mine with a half-second delay. 15 seconds in, it began to rise. It looked human but wasn't built for the posture, spine bowing forward, palms flat, knees askew. In its face, the planes of my own features bloomed, almost correct, just reversed, as though mirrored from inside the skin out. 22 seconds. 2 more shapes slid in beside it, crawling over and under each other, skin stretching translucently in the flash's pre-flicker. Their hands bent backward to brace, all fours at once, but the finger bones bent too far, the joints cracking like ice snapping on a lake. 30 seconds. Flash. White obliterated everything. I stumbled blind, fell against the door. When color returned, the shadows weren't gone. They'd repositioned around me in a perfect circle, heads low, necks craned toward the still cool glass of my lens. A shutter fired beside my ear. I didn't lift it. The light came from their side this time, a burst that left ghost images seared across my vision. When I blinked them clear, I wasn't standing. I was kneeling, camera at my face, snow warm beneath my knees as though breathing. One of the things touched my shoulder. It felt like my own hand pressing down. Click. Another exposure. Click. And everything went pure magnesium white. 3 weeks later, a rescue chopper spotted the relay's antenna poking through thaw ice and sent a snow team down. They found the cabin door open, hinges sheared clean, floor buried in drifts. Every wall bore photographs, hundreds of them, printed in heavy black and white, each a self-portrait of the same man in different poses of flight or prayer. None of the faces were clear. They never recovered my body. The gear bag lay outside, zippers open, battery packs still warm. My camera sat upright in the snow, lens pointed at the ridge. Inside were 200 frames. The last recorded timestamp was weeks beyond my mission window. Frame 199 shows the cabin half collapsed under aurora light. Frame 200 looks back toward it from 30 yards away. Between those two distances, no footprints. The final exposure was taken 43 minutes after the rest. The metadata lists the photographer as E. Kearns, but the GPS tag places the camera 40 feet west of itself. The image is simple, a human figure on all fours, naked against the snow, face hidden, its palms leaving not indentations but faint glows, as if the ice retained heat where human hands should have frozen. The The recovery specialists archived the pictures with wildlife samples under unknown atmospheric anomaly. The magazine printed a 2-line notice: photographer missing during fieldwork in Denali National Preserve, presumed deceased. Some nights, local rangers still receive automated transmissions from the old relay band. No voice, just the rhythmic pulse of a camera shutter played backwards. If you ever travel north alone and hear snow crack under a rhythm that matches your breathing, don't turn, don't whistle, don't test the echo. That's how it learns you. Out here, everything survives by imitation. Keep your fire small, your voice smaller, and when the silence bends itself into your shape, let it go unacknowledged. Do not take its picture. Do not let it take yours.